Welcome back. Wow, that's some messed up hair. Hold on. Welcome back, guys. I'm going to answer the question that nobody has asked and nobody cares about the answer to. Is the new Ford Super Duty the modern GMT 800 truck? So hear me out before you click off this video. What we're going to be comparing today is my 2005 Silverado. Now let's just make believe this is a 2500. It obviously isn't. But for the sake of this video, we're going to play pretend because there's not a lot of differences for what we're going to talk about. And my 2022 Ford F250. First, we'll take a look at the interiors. Don't mind that. This has heated seats. We got memory seat positions, power folding mirrors. We've got obviously door locks and stuff, windows. Only 2 windows on these extended cabs back in the day. Push button 4-wheel drive, automatic headlights. You know, kind of the normal features you'd expect for a newer vehicle. It had back then. Auto dimming mirror, you got the steering wheel controls. You could obviously put a touchscreen in. The radio is going to be old school, obviously. Automatic climate control. And a pretty simple interior otherwise. Obviously, anybody who's been alive the last decade has, you know, been in one of these trucks, friend, family, they own one, whatever, right? There's really not much to see here. 250,486 miles. We're going to take a quick look here. We've got oil pressure, battery voltage, fuel obviously, and then coolant temp. And in my opinion, all of these gauges work pretty darn well. I've driven this truck 180,000 miles. When things have gone wrong, the gauges have told me exactly what's going wrong and when it's going wrong, right? So pretty accurate, which is nice. We'll touch on that later interior wise. Obviously your normal stuff, there's really nothing too crazy. It's a freaking truck, it's whatever. Okay, so keep this in mind when we go into the Ford. So when we go into the Ford, you'll notice we've got no memory seats functions, mostly a function of the fact that it's a lower trim model. But we do have power folding mirrors. But if we look at our gauges, we've got fairly similar setup. However, all of these gauges up here are half smart, half dumb. And by that I mean they will rise and fall depending on if things are hot or cold or, you know, whatever's going on, low oil pressure, high oil pressure, but they don't really have a number attached to them. They're not a, you know, they're only just triggered by a computer signal. They're not actively measuring that, you know, giving you the readout of that active measurement, right? So not a huge deal, but it is annoying. I would prefer that. Obviously the interior looks completely different, but you've got your steering wheel controls. You know, nowadays you have a screen, of course. You got actually manual climate controls, you know, normal radio stuff, 4-wheel drive, push button, obviously on a dial. You've got a lot more storage, much bigger console. You got all this kind of crap. You got this deal down here, big old glove box, upper glove box, crazy amount of door compartments. You know, they've really modernized the interior, made it much more functional than a GMT 800, just because, I mean, none of the trucks back then were. But I want to point out, this is where the differences start to end and the similarities begin. And I know you're thinking that that's like a crazy thing to say, but stay tuned. Right, now, before I talk about stuff under the hood, first of all, it's filthy. Second of all, remember we're playing pretend. So we're pretending this is a 2500. So this would have came from the factory with a 6-liter V8, and it would have came with a clutch fan, which will come into play later down the road here. The half tons had electric fans and a 5.3. So regardless, you've got an LS-based V8. I just want you to notice the coil packs. Look at the, even just kind of the way the headers bolt on. This has aftermarket headers, but the manifolds obviously bolt on the same. The way the spark plugs are, just kind of the intake track and the fuel rails, where the alternator is, where some of the other stuff is, where the battery is, fuse box, brakes, the whole 9 yards, right? It's just the way that it looks under the hood. There's a fair amount of space to work on stuff. You've got, you know, pretty easy access to a lot of different components here. Your oil fill cap is there. There's normally an elbow that goes on here. I wish I had it. It broke and I never got a new one. But your oil's on the left-hand side. Valve cover, fill. So this is kind of some of the mechanical stuff, right? All of a sudden, we pop open the hood of this brand new Ford, basically brand new. Brakes. Now we've got our pressure, coolant, overflow tank here. Our windshield washer fluid is still right there. But look at this, guys. Look at this valve cover. Awfully similar looking. Look at the way the manifolds mount and the way that they bolt, the way the spark plugs are. It looks awfully similar. The alternator's in the same spot. Again, clutch fin, which you would have on a 2500. Your intake arm is in the exact same spot, right? You just got this fun little intake area here, but other than that, it's the same. Battery's over here. However, a second battery would be over there. The oil fill is here, but in the exact same spot, just a mirror image, which is kind of funny. Tons of space to work on stuff. Even the serpentine belt pattern is fairly similar. Power steering's in a similar spot. ABS is in a way different spot. But, lots of similarities. Back to the Chevy. We're gonna give a good old crawl under. You've got your drain plug for the oil, and you've got your filter over to the left-hand side of your oil pan. And they're right next to each other, so they're super easy to replace. Transmission, obviously, but that's pretty much the same in every truck, let's be honest. Transfer case, again, is pretty much the same. Rear drive shaft, rear end, all that stuff's the same, so I'm not going to try to play some game like that means anything. But take note of the oil pan and the filter location, okay? On this Ford, you've literally got the drain plug right there and your oil filter on the mirror image side of the oil pan. So, interestingly enough, is again the exact same setup, just a mirror image in this case, but otherwise the same. And we do have a transmission or a oil cooler right here, but on a 2500 Chevy, you'd also have an oil cooler just built into the radiator. And solid axle, so that's going to be different, of course. But even your exhaust is all kind of the same-ish, a little bit different, of course. So you can see that on the outside, they look very different. But underneath the hood and underneath the truck, they're a lot more similar than you think. And where the similarities really start to come into play here is when we start looking at the actual, further in the mechanicals, right? Both V8s are port fuel injection. They both don't have any variable valve timing, cylinder deactivation of any sort. They're both pushrod cam and block designs. And just visually, the outsides of the engines, the accessories, the valve covers, the spark plug locations, that 7.3 Godzilla motor is nearly identical to the 6-liter Chevy engine in a lot of different ways. They really kind of arguably just knocked it off. And somebody there is saying, oh, well, Chevy stole the LS design from the small block Ford. Sure, whatever. I don't know. I don't care. Just interesting that they're all kind of similar, right? So if you look at kind of that sort of stuff and just even the way things are laid out under the hood, it's not so much different. Obviously it's different, but it's not so much different. And what are the things that made people love the GMT 800 trucks so much? Typically it was reliability, right? Especially in the 2500s. It was ease of repair, cost of repair, that sort of thing. Well, cost of repair is going to be more on the newer truck because there is more tech still. The transmission's got 10 speeds and all that kind of thing. So that is what it is. But the ease of repair, I think, is relatively close. I think the GMT 800 is definitely easier to repair. But it's still pretty easy to get the stuff under that hood. You got to remember, that Ford's hood is meant to hold a 6.7 Power Stroke with freaking all these turbos and emission stuff hanging off of it and everything else. So you got a lot of extra space there because that 7.3 gas engine is, relatively speaking, small, which is kind of funny to say that a 7.3 is small, but in this case it is, physically, the body of the motor. Now we're going to dive into some technical specs. We're going to look at bore and stroke, power per cubic inch, all that kind of stuff. The horsepower number is up to 330, so we're going to use the higher number for this LQ4. And if you do the math, a 330 horsepower 6-liter engine, which of course this is 6 liters, is 55 horsepower per liter. Okay, that's what that number works out to. You can see my doggy in the background. If we go to the Godzilla, we've got 430 horsepower at 7.3 liters. That's 58 horsepower per liter. So very similar. Obviously a little bit more, but very, very similar. You've got 475 foot-pounds, and then you got 370 here. So again, the numbers are almost identical percentage-wise. On the Godzilla, we've got 5,500 RPM, peak horsepower, 4,000 torque. And then I believe the LS is actually pretty similar to that. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. All the stuff it came in, we don't care about that. Again, 6 liters. Bore is 4 inches. Stroke is 3.622. So as we know, right, bore is going to give you, stroke length is going to give you more torque generally down low. All else being equal. The Ford has 3.976 stroke and a 4.22 bore. So, yes, the bore and the stroke are both bigger, so you're thinking, oh, it's not that similar. But that's what actually makes it similar. So if we take, divide one by the other, 4 divided by 3.622, we wind up with a 1.10 ratio. If we do the same thing here, 4.22 divided by, you're just off screen. Sorry, guys. Divided by 3.976, you've got a 1.06 ratio. So even the bore to stroke ratio is pretty close. Bore spacing is 4.5 inches. On the 6.0, it's 4.4. So that's what makes the 7.3 like a medium block, if you will. But we've got 6 bolt mains on the LS. We have 6 bolt mains, 4 bolts with 2 laterals, 6 bolt mains on the 7.3. So I scrolled back up to the top. And the last thing we'll look at is just the visual outside of the engine, which we looked at in the truck as well. But again, notice kind of the way things look with the clutch fan on it. And then we switch to the Godzilla, and it looks awfully similar in a lot of ways. We've got very similar front-end accessories and pulleys and all that kind of stuff, right? Again, we got that oil filter on this side as opposed to the LS, which is on this side. On this side. You can't see it. But we really have 2 fairly similar engines. This 7.3 Godzilla is almost just a large LS motor. As much as Ford guys and Chevy guys alike may not want to admit that for whatever reason, that's kind of what it is. So draw whatever conclusions from that you will. All right, guys, so let me know in the comments, am I really stretching on this one, or do I have a good point? Either way, I want to hear from you. I think there's definitely an argument to be made either way. I would argue, obviously, the direction I argued, but I want to hear your opinions. So anyways, as always, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.